So why is the UK's asylum system just always in crisis? It's costing us billions, it's creating record backlogs, and it's causing unbelievable human suffering. But what if all this chaos isn't an accident? What if the system is actually working exactly the way it was designed to? Let's dig in and try to unravel this expensive and very human paradox.
And we have to start with the human cost. You just have to listen to this quote from a recent debate in Parliament. It gets right to the heart of the psychological damage being done to people who are trapped in this system. Behind all the numbers and the politics, there are real people whose lives are just stuck, broken by the very process that's supposed to be offering them safety.
And then there's the money. I mean, check this out. The Chancellor's own audit shows the asylum system has overspent by a staggering £6.4 billion. That's taxpayer money, which raises a pretty big question, right? How can a system be so incredibly expensive and yet so completely broken?
All right, so to really get a grip on just how big this crisis is, you got to look at the numbers. And the data, well, it paints a really stark picture of a system that's at its absolute breaking point.
We're seeing a record number of asylum seekers arriving on small boats, and it's a trend that's just continuing to go up. These arrivals are, the most visible part of the problem, but they're a symptom of the immense pressure on the entire system. And when you combine this influx of people with, well, what a lot of legal experts are calling rushed and pretty poor quality decision-making, you get this, the biggest asylum backlog in UK history. Put simply, more people are waiting longer than ever before for a decision that will literally define their future.
And look, this crisis at home, it's having massive ripple effects across the globe. The bill for housing asylum seekers here in the UK has ballooned to £3.7 billion a year. That's almost a third of the entire UK foreign aid budget. That's double the average of other big donor countries. So we're essentially taking money meant for development projects overseas and spending it on hotels right here.
So all this chaos, all this cost, and all this human suffering, it all boils down to one central question. Is this just a broken system, or is it a system that was designed to be broken? Is this all just one big, expensive mistake, or is the failure actually the whole point?
Well, the answer might actually be found in this one political idea that has completely dominated UK asylum policy for more than 20 years, no matter who's in power.
It's this thing called the pull factor orthodoxy. The core belief is really simple. If you make life in the UK difficult and unpleasant for asylum seekers, fewer people will try to come. For decades, this has been the unwavering bedrock of asylum policy.
And you can see exactly how this theory gets put into practice. The goal is to create what they call a hostile environment. How do you do that? Well, you process claims super slowly, you ban people from working, you stick them in basic housing like those barges you've seen, and you try to ship them off to other countries, like Rwanda.
And this isn't some new thing, and it's not a Tory or a Labour thing either. It's a real political tradition, you could say. It started with work restrictions under Tony Blair's Labour government, then Theresa May cranked it up with the whole hostile environment policy, and it's continued right up to today with things like the Rwanda scheme.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what happens when that theory crashes into reality? Let's look at what the evidence actually shows us about the consequences.
In this slide, right here, it shows you the central paradox perfectly. The policy says asylum seekers are banned from working. The result? They're forced to depend on the state, which means the taxpayer, you, has to pay for their housing and support.
And the price tag for that one decision, it's just astronomical. In 2022 alone, the government burned through almost £2 billion just on hotel rooms. That is a direct consequence of preventing people from earning their own money to pay their own rent.
Just take a look at this recent plan to clear the backlog. Instead of interviews, people from countries like Syria and Afghanistan were sent this long questionnaire. The catch? It was only in English. And the official government advice was literally to use online translation tools. They got just 20 days to fill it out, usually without a lawyer, and if they failed, their whole claim could be thrown out. I mean, critics say it's a system that's almost designed for people to fail.
Yeah, and an MP in Parliament really hit the nail on the head when he said, "We spend a great deal of money preventing them from working." It just perfectly sums up how absurd it is, right? We're spending a fortune not on fixing things, but on enforcing dependency.
So you have to ask, if this whole deterrence idea is so expensive and just creates chaos, why on earth do they stick with it? Well,
Maybe it's because the system isn't just trapped by its design, it's defined by it.
But here's the kicker. Does this whole deterrence thing even work? According to the Home Office's own research, not really. It turns out people come to the UK because of push factors, war, persecution, or they come because they have family here, or they speak English. And the government's own data found that most asylum seekers have, and I'm quoting here, little to no understanding of UK asylum policies. I mean, how can a policy deter you if you don't even know it exists?
And then there's this, another key part of the whole design. Under UK rules, it's pretty much impossible to apply for asylum from outside the UK. There's no such thing as an asylum visa. So to claim refuge here, you have to physically get here first.
And that right there is how the policy creates the exact problem it says it wants to fix. When you get rid of all the safe and legal ways for people to apply for asylum, you force them into dangerous, uncontrolled ones. The small boat crossings aren't happening in a vacuum. They're a direct result of people having no other options.
All right, so we've looked at the shaky theory, the mind-boggling costs, and all the contradictions baked right into the system. Where does that leave us?
So what we're left with is this: a central policy built on a theory with hardly any evidence. A policy that costs taxpayers billions of pounds. A policy that creates huge backlogs in total administrative chaos. And a policy that has a terrible, terrible human cost. It fails by almost every logical measure you can think of.
Which leaves us with one last really big question. If the policy of deterrence is so expensive, and evidence shows it's ineffective, why do successive governments cling to it? If the system doesn't work as a practical solution, what if its failure is the point? What political goals are served by a system that appears to be in a constant state of expensive, chaotic crisis? That is the unresolved paradox at the very heart of the UK's asylum system.